Hi, I want to talk about the first two chapters of the Lord of the Rings and reflect on the theology of that for a bit. So, at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings, Bilbo is 111 years old and he wants to go on this journey where he tells Gandalf, I want to go to the mountains and find a place where I can find rest. But there is a problem. To go to the mountains and find rest, Bilbo has to let go of the ring of power that he has. Bilbo is unable to do that. At the point at which his journey has to start, Bilbo says, This is my precious, I cannot let go of that. And Gandalf tells him, Bilbo, let go of the ring and then you can be free and be yourself. Bilbo says, No, I will do as I please, and resists letting go of the ring, going on to this journey to find rest in the mountains. See, from a theological perspective, this aspect of the ring becoming an obsession for Bilbo represents what we call kind of an idol or an attachment. An attachment is something that we think we really need for us to be happy. An attachment is something that becomes so much a part of our identity that we feel we need that to be okay. And sometimes attachments comes in many different forms, and sometimes there are good things that can become an attachment. A job or a spouse or a house can become this idealized attachment in our mind that unless we have it in that form, we think we can never be happy, we can never rest. So for Bilbo, this ring of power has become this obsession for him. It's become this attachment which he thinks he needs to be happy and to find rest, but he doesn't realize that it is that attachment that is preventing him from finding true happiness and rest in the mountains. So here's the thing, how do you get rid of an attachment? How do you get rid of an obsession? In the story, Gandalf tells Bilbo, Bilbo, trust me like you used to. And that's an important point. You see, because the antidote for our obsession ultimately is trust. For us to let go of our attachment, we have to trust that our ultimate happiness comes from our journey with God. Our ultimate happiness is not in getting this one thing or getting a car or getting a house or getting a spouse. Our ultimate happiness or our highest happiness comes through our journey with God. It is only when we realize that we can let go of this attachment and find a place and come to a place of rest. Until we are holding too tightly to this attachment, we can never get to a place of rest. Ed Diner is a psychologist. He says happiness is not a place, it is a process. And in a sense, what he means is happiness is the journey that we go on to get to a place of wholeness, if you will, to get to a place of freedom, if you will. In many ways, the Lord of the Rings is a kind of is a journey, right? It's a journey that goes on an adventure. It is a journey towards freedom. The problem is, oftentimes journeys come with danger. When we think about our highest happiness comes in trusting that it is through this journey with God. We don't say that journey is without dangers. Yeah, no, the journey has many different dangers. And in fact, even in the book, when Sam and Frodo go on the journey, there are people that are naysayers that say, oh, this journey is going to be so hard. In fact, one of those is Sam's dad. So this is the Lord of the Rings book that I'm reading. So anyways, I love this cover, red and the Lord of the Rings. Anyways, so Sam's dad, Gaffer, tells Sam, elves and dragons? Cabbages and potatoes are better for you and me. Don't go getting mixed up in the business of your betters, or you'll land in trouble too big for you. This is something that Gaffer tells Sam, because Sam is getting ready to go on this journey, with Frodo, and he's drawn to the things that Frodo wants to do, and Gaffer is trying to discourage Sam from getting on these dangerous journeys with people that are kind of better than him. So any attempt at going on a journey always involves danger, and to trust in God means we don't let the fear of the danger and the risk to stop us. So how do you develop that kind of a trust, where it is a trust that does not stop us from this journey of adventure? In The Lord of the Rings, when Gandalf is talking to Frodo, he actually tells Frodo that he has this one line that he tells to Frodo. He says, "There is something else at work behind the design of the ring maker. There is something else at work behind the design of the ring maker." That's an important phrase. You see, when Gandalf tells, "Trust me," his trust ultimately is premised on the idea that behind everything that goes on, behind all of these journeys and all of the stories, God's grand design is in control. That is more powerful than the design of the ring maker. To really understand what's going on, we have to kind of go back to the Silmarillion, which is a different book that Tolkien wrote. In a sense, if the Lord of the Rings were to be the New Testament, the Silmarillion is kind of like the Old Testament. So in the Silmarillion, Tolkien has this creation mythology where he's talking about how the creation came into being. And in that, you have a god called Iluvatar, who is creating creation by having his heavenly choir sing creation into being. And as this heavenly choir is singing, creation is kind of coming into being. Everything is beautiful, everything is grand. And at that point, there is this one powerful angel called Melkor, who's kind of a Lucifer figure. Melkor starts singing some discordant tunes into this grand orchestra that God is orchestrating. And there are some angels then that join him in these discordant tunes, and other angels are confused. They're thinking, okay, do I join with Melkor, or do I sing along with God's conducting of this choir? Why is Iluvatar doing nothing about this? And at that point, Iluvatar stops, and he has the whole heavenly choir stop singing. And then he looks at Melkor and tells him, "Hey Melkor, I'm not going to stop you from singing your discordant tunes. Because what you will realize is, as you're singing all these discordant tunes, I am brilliant enough to take all these discordant tunes and bring deeper harmonies through these discordant tunes that you are singing. So that way, what you'll realize is I'm even more brilliant than your kind of schemes of rebellion or evil, if you will, right?" So Sauron is Melkor's apprentice. So the ring that Sauron has designed is kind of this discordant tone or discordant tune that is coming into God's melody. And basically what Gandalf is saying is, hey, our trust in God is based on this idea that God is in ultimate control of history. So even if bad things happen here and there, God is powerful enough to take those things and bring deeper harmonies out of that. And in a sense, this is what Paul talks about in Romans 8:28, where he says, all things work for the good of those that love God. So us going on this journey of adventure with God, us trusting that when our highest happiness is in this journey of adventure with God, it does not mean that that journey is free of dangers. It does not mean that that journey is without risks. For example, when you look at Abraham, God calls Abraham from his kind of comfortable place on this journey of adventure to go into the wilderness. And that God tells Abraham, I myself will be your reward. And in as much as Abraham's trust was in that idea that, hey, God has called me on this journey of adventure and my reward is in this journey of adventure with God, he was okay. But when he let that attachment to immediately get a son, allow him to get, when that became an obsession, That's when he takes Hagar in and tries to have another son, which gets into all these other problems for Abraham. But even that is something that God takes and kind of builds a bigger harmony or a bigger melody through that, so that ultimately it all works for the good, for the blessing of many different nations. So again, what we have here is the idea of our obsessions or attachments prevent us from finding true happiness and true rest. And what we have in the Lord of the Rings is, or at least in the first two chapters, is that our way out of our obsessions is the way out of our way of letting go of attachments is to place our trust in the idea that our highest happiness is not in all these things that we can get, whether it's a house or a spouse or a job, but our highest happiness or our highest rest is in this journey of adventure that we go with God. Life is a journey, and for us to go on this journey of adventure, that journey ultimately has to be fueled by the trust that our highest happiness and rest comes in this journey of adventure with God that we go on in our life. So that's kind of a big theme that comes up, at least for me, in the first two chapters of the Lord of the Rings. So until I see you in another exposition of the chapters of the Lord of the Rings, goodbye. See you again.